Hello and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at.
Here in Illinois, we're setting a higher bar for data center development.
Data center policy discussions heat up in Illinois. And Cook County invests in gun violence prevention. Board President Toni Preckwinkle joins to discuss more in depth. First off tonight, a third case out of the federal prosecutor's office in Chicago is being dismissed as U.S. Attorney Andrew Boutros' office reviews scores of cases connected to the same prosecutor who led the Broadview 6 case. Boutros today filed a motion to dismiss arson charges against 5 people after he found that his prosecutor again had conversations with grand jurors outside of the case's official proceedings in July of last year. During that conversation, she reportedly told jurors that, quote, she can prove this case before adding, quote, we don't catch the smart ones and most of them aren't as smart as they think. The U.S. attorney says he's reviewing more than 100 grand jury cases related to that same prosecutor, Sherry Mecklenburg, dating as far back as 2007. Faith leaders and some city officials are calling on Chicago to create a permanent department of gun violence reduction. This comes just days after a drive-by shooting injured more than a dozen people on the city's far south side.
The reality is that Chicago currently has what many residents would describe as a ghost office of violence prevention, an office that has been inadequately staffed, inadequately resourced, and unable to fully meet the scale of this crisis facing our communities.
The group says it has the support of the Deputy Mayor for Community Safety, Emmanuel Andre, as they push forward an ordinance that would create this department. They say it would establish gun violence prevention as a core function of city government that cannot be dismantled when leadership in City Hall changes. Among other steps, the ordinance would give the new department procurement and contracting authority, establish a community advisory board, and coordinate citywide efforts to prevent and respond to gun violence. A lawsuit accuses the city of having sidewalks with accessibility issues. Plaintiffs argue the poor maintenance of the walkways make it difficult and in some cases impossible for folks with disabilities like those with limited mobility or low vision to use them. After a court-ordered action to fix walkways in 2023, Chicago is being sued again. The city has filed a motion to dismiss the case saying, quote, plaintiffs have not plausibly alleged facts to establish personal knowledge of and intent to use every pedestrian facility in the city, totaling more than 7,400 miles of sidewalks, curb ramps, and crosswalks. The court-appointed monitor's report on the city's progress installing accessible pedestrian signals is expected July 1st. Logan Square residents may have noticed some updates to their neighborhood. City officials cut the ceremonial ribbon today on the now completed redesign of Logan Square, which includes a new public plaza next to the CTA Blue Line station there. It's called La Placita.
The plaza reminds us that we're never meant to live life alone. Plazas are democratic spaces. They belong to everyone. You don't need money to enter a plaza. You don't need an invitation to enter a plaza. You don't need to prove to anyone that you belong. Your presence is enough. And that's why spaces like this matter for us.
La Placita is part of a larger project that's transformed Milwaukee Avenue between Belmont and Logan Square, making a portion of Milwaukee that once cut through the square easier for pedestrians to navigate. Some surrounding roadways have also been reconfigured, making way for new green space. The project also restored 8 historic globe light fixtures surrounding the Centennial Monument and addressed some long-standing traffic safety issues in the area. Up next, the debate over data centers. It's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Data centers are one of the most hot-button topics in Chicago and Illinois and around the country. Alongside more construction comes more public scrutiny of their economic and environmental impacts, their strain on the power grid, and their role in AI development. Earlier this month, Governor Pritzker suspended tax breaks for data center developments. And while a General Assembly bill regulating new data centers did not make it across the finish line this spring, it will likely come up again in the fall. Joining us to talk about data center development are Brad Teets, State Policy Director of the Data Center Coalition, Jen Walling, CEO of the Illinois Environmental Council, Andrea Densham, Director of Regional Government Affairs for the Alliance for the Great Lakes, and Ramiro Hernandez, Vice President of Public Policy for the Illinois Chamber of Commerce. Thanks to all of you for joining us. So, Brad, starting with you first, why are data centers receiving so much attention now?
Well, and you have to take a step back. The data center industry has been around for decades, right? There's been 20 plus data centers in Elk Grove Village now since the early 2000s. Obviously, we are seeing a growth trajectory with the industry because of the demand from residents and businesses for digital services and data, right? So the average household today has 21 connected devices in it. We're going to use twice the amount of data in the next 5 years that we used in the last 10 years. 95% of Fortune 500 companies are operating on a cloud-based system. 91% of small businesses are using AI-embedded tools in their business practices. So that is what our industry is working to meet, is the demand for data. And it's not just entertainment, right? It's your hospital records, bank records, government, schools, public safety, remote work, telehealth, like the list goes on. So that's what we're working for. Obviously, I think the growth has caused some communities to ask questions, and we're working with communities to try to figure that part out.
Jen, why is the data center industry, why is it a focal point for environmental advocacy?
Data centers use a colossal amount of energy, which contributes to climate change if it's not done right. If we are using the power sector in a way that we're bringing more carbon sources online or keeping them online longer, it's going to be problematic. We've proposed an approach that's bring your own new clean energy. It also is something that uses a ton of water, and we'll leave that to others to discuss, but also has a strong impact on communities. There's noise pollution, there's ways that it impacts an area where it develops, and we're extremely concerned about data centers and their environmental impacts.
Ramiro, what impact do data centers have on the state's economy?
I think they play a huge role in the economic impact of the overall state growth on innovative sectors for sure, the tech sector especially. I think looking at the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunities report, they annually review the incentive, and just based off of the projects that have received the incentive over the last few years, there's been almost $16 billion of investment in those projects, and obviously that's just a fraction of what the industry represents across the state. So from that perspective, it's a major driver for jobs and investment, and also local revenue.
And of course, Jen mentioned water. Andrea, what makes data centers a water policy issue?
Yeah, the Alliance for the Great Lakes has been working for 50 years to protect the Great Lakes and the clean water. Not only that keep those lakes clean and healthy for the ecosystem, but also for drinking water. Many of us receive drinking water from it. It really helps to infuse our groundwater. And one of the concerns, as Jen was noting, is the amount of water that is used, especially at large scale. We had a report last year about the large scale data users and data centers, but also other large scale users that really are pulling up a lot of resources in terms of water. We need to manage it right. We need to ensure not only the amount of water that's going in, but any of the output, so any pollution that's going out, that we're protecting and ensuring there's no additional pollution. At the Alliance, we helped years ago pass the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, dealing with the last century's pollution from industry. We just want to make sure that we're not causing those kind of harms on communities, on our neighbors, or on our ecosystems, and we need to keep our drinking water clean.
Brad, to that point, how do data centers use water, and are they using more of it as they continue to grow and to flourish, and as AI develops?
And you have to, not every data center even uses water. And some are using hybrid systems where in a climate like Illinois, for 90% of the year, they'll use the outside air temperature to cool their facilities. And then maybe for a few weeks during the summer, go to a liquid or water cooling solution. And we're getting more and more efficient by the day. I'm sure most people have heard of the closed loop system now, but there's direct to chip, liquid immersion, so many different innovations happening in this space. But we use far less less water than other industries do, and we use less water than golf courses. There was a report that came out from Elk Grove Village. Their data centers there are using less water than car washes and laundromats. 83% of data centers in Virginia, the capital for data centers in the world, are using less water than an average commercial building. So we could go on with all the different examples. We're going to become more and more efficient. I mean, by 2030, many of our member companies have commitments to be water positive, so actually additive to the water system. And there are so many different things we can do from a water reuse, treated wastewater infrastructure perspective, and we want to play a role in that.
Jen, okay, so we talked about legislation in Springfield that didn't make it in this past session. Tell us a little bit about the proposed regulations in the Power Act, please.
So we introduced with lawmakers the Protecting Our Water, Energy, and Ratepayers Act. This is a bill that looks at three main components of data center regulation. It's setting guardrails on data centers. We make sure that data centers pay their fair share. We're making sure that on energy usage, they're using clean energy and they're not prioritized over other electricity users. We look at communities, making sure there's process and transparency when one of these facilities go in, and then looking at the water requirements, making sure that we have closed loop in other systems.
But no moratorium on data centers.
There's no moratorium, there's no ban. There are communities all over that are enacting moratoriums or bans on data centers. The city of Aurora has enacted parallel regulation to the Power Act. So we're seeing these things happen in different ways all over the state, but it's not a moratorium, it's not a ban, it's guardrails on data centers.
And if I don't mind jumping in here, the issue of guardrails are really important. I noted the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. We had to spend billions of dollars to clean up the last century's pollution. And we want to ensure that not only are we protecting groundwater and Great Lakes water, but we want to ensure that we're not further polluting. And so we do that by having smart guardrails. We do that by ensuring there's monitoring of water use and water outputs, right? Those guardrails are reasonable and designed to be the kind that can ensure that our communities know what's both being used and what's going out. And if there are moments of drought like we have had downstate, that we can ensure that these large water users, that these data centers do not pull water away either away from agriculture or from homes.
Brad, thoughts, concerns with the Power Act?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a 638-page bill that regulates one industry unlike any other industry in the country, and quite frankly, they would have saved themselves a lot of time had they just drafted a moratorium bill, because that is the practical impact of what this bill would do. Illinois is already experiencing, we were number 2 in the country for data center growth 2023, and now we're number 8, 9, or 10 in most state rankings. So we're already slipping pretty significantly, which means, you know, the $2.5 billion in state and local tax revenues are no longer going to come here. They're going to go to Indiana or Wisconsin or Iowa. The jobs, the investment, like the list goes on. So, you know, having said that, there are certainly areas within the Power Act that we can work on. And we've talked to Jen and others about that, and we'd like to have those conversations. We were begging for negotiations to happen all throughout session, which never happened, which I think is unfortunate. So I think the hope is to get there, though, and reach a package in the fall veto session or lame duck session.
Okay, so 2024 report from Lawrence Berkeley National Labs found that data centers accounted for about 2% of total electricity consumption in the country in 2018. This topped 4% in 2023 and is expected to reach between 6 and 12% by 2028. And this trend is expected to be similar in Illinois, to keep growing. Ramiro, what kind of economic and environmental policies, for that matter, do you think the state should be considering to keep up with that growth?
Yeah, no, I think to what the panelists have already alluded to, I think you have a situation where we have on the table a proposal that, you know, is fairly broad and does encompass a lot more, you know, than any one specific regulatory framework. Obviously, there were over a dozen pieces of legislation that were introduced in Springfield this legislative session, one of which was the Power Act, right? I think there are just a lot of concerns with kind of one-size-fits-all approach to kind of some of the regulations that are contained in the larger package, over 600 pages of regulatory framework, whether it's the permitting cost of increases on fees and certain other types of new onerous provisions on the industry. I think it's a challenge from our perspective to, on a philosophical level, allow for such an immense kind of burden on the industry.
You know, different communities have different water sources and different environmental concerns. What might some local communities, Ramiro, why might they want a data center in their area? What are the benefits for them?
Absolutely. I think one of the pieces that I highlighted on the economic basis is the local revenue, right? I think you see several different projects, not only on the investment on the capital infrastructure side, but you see a lot of good partners in the community that are providing substantial property tax benefits to local communities throughout the state, right? Not just the ones that are receiving the current incentive that is scheduled to be paused. So from that perspective, I think you see a lot of revenue generated not just by the industry, but kind of the ancillary ecosystem that is built, and obviously good paying jobs on both the construction side to our partners over in organized labor, but also kind of the cumulative impact on the economy locally.
So we know the governor announced earlier this month that he'd be suspending the tax incentives for data center construction. Jen, do you think pausing that addresses any of the environmental concerns that you have?
We are thrilled that the governor paused the data center tax incentives and came out with 7 principles that really mirror the Power Act. But I don't think that this is going to be a long-term solution. Hopefully it pushes everybody to the table. We've talked about the economic benefits, but I think the thing we haven't highlighted here is energy affordability. That what this is going to do in energy in Illinois has already done is wild. 64% of energy growth in the next 10 years is expected to be from data centers. When we look at, there are 24 gigawatts of peak power in the ComEd territory right now in the summer. There's 28 gigawatts of proposed data centers. That infrastructure is going to cost $24 billion to meet those needs, of which we need to make sure that that residents are not paying for things that data centers are causing, which is already happening to our electricity bills.
Okay, that's unfortunately where we'll have to leave it. I'm sure we'll be talking about this more as more happens over the summer, potentially. Brad Teets, Jen Walling, Andrea Densham, and Ramiro Hernandez. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle on the county's latest gun violence prevention efforts. This Gun Violence Awareness Month, Cook County leaders are touting a major milestone. Gun homicides have decreased by more than 50% since 2021, marking several consecutive years of decline. Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle says those gains are partly driven by the county's investments in community violence prevention programs. Last Wednesday, the Preckwinkle administration announced an additional $20 million for street outreach, case management, and victim services. Joining us to break down the investment is Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle. Welcome back, Madam President. Thanks for joining us.
Sure enough. Good evening.
So walk us through, please, what this new $20 million investment will be for. How will it be used?
Well, first of all, I want to express my concern and sympathy for those who are victims of gun violence. You know, it's a terrible tragedy and impacts families and communities more broadly. So I think we need to understand that every shooting is one too many. We've invested a lot of money over the last 5 years in violence prevention work, community violence intervention in particular, having outreach workers in the streets to tamp down the violence that sometimes follows in retaliation to a shooting, and to work with those who are at high risk of being involved in violence, to provide them with job training, to provide them with behavioral health supports, to provide them with housing if need be. So we're working with a variety of community-based organizations that are involved in violence prevention work. And the $20 million was an investment in the outreach workers who do the dangerous and difficult work of trying to tamp down violence in some of our most struggling neighborhoods.
We hear about that work, and a lot of it, Madam President, we know is done by community organizations doing that sort of community violence intervention work. Give us some examples, if you would, of the organizations that will be receiving that funding and the kind of work that they do.
Well, let me talk about the kind of work that's done. Some of it is with those who are coming out of jail or prison to help them find a more productive path, to support them in their journey to being productive members of the community. Some of it goes to young people who are just as involved, to try to be sure that they have the opportunity to straighten out their lives. Some of it goes to the outreach workers that I mentioned earlier. But the whole point of the investment is to try to provide wraparound services for those who need them and who might be at risk of being either the victims or perpetrators of violence.
And of course, as we mentioned, gun homicides have decreased by more than 50% since 2021. How do we know that it is the violence prevention funding and the work that that gets funded by this money, that is the source of the decline?
Well, we have an academic partner in Northwestern University, and Northwestern found in its research that those communities that received the most violence intervention investment saw the biggest reductions in violent crime. So we've done this work in partnership with academic researchers, and that's what's been reported.
Are there geographically, are there any neighborhoods or suburbs that are still a challenge?
Well, we have challenges across the city and county, but the point I think I would make is that there's a Government Alliance for Safe Communities, GASC, and it involves the state and the city and the county, and we're investing in a complementary way rather than being duplicative, and we've learned over the last 5 years what works, and we're investing in what works.
These type of investments, they were, we know, kickstarted by dollars from the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, and we know that I think it is through the end of this year that you have to spend those funds. How much longer, or do you believe that Cook County will be able to continue to support these efforts beyond the end of this year?
We've put aside money to continue to make investments in violence prevention because we know how critical it is to the communities that have been struggling with violence for so long. So we're devoting county resources as the federal funding has diminished to addressing community violence.
Okay. As we mentioned, you all have been making these sort of similar investments in violence prevention since 2021. What is it about these these programs that let you know that that they're working?
Well, we've seen this dramatic reduction in violence, so I mean that's the indication. And as I said, Northwestern University's researchers found that those communities where we made the biggest investments, saw the largest reductions in violent crime. So clearly there's a correlation between the investments we make and the violence reduction.
Okay. And while we have you, Madam President, the county budget, your office is forecasting a $550 million budget shortfall in 2027, the largest in 16 years. And of course, a balanced budget at Cook County is something that that's been sort of a hallmark of your term there. What would you say is the cause of that gap this time?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to remember that for 16 years, we've balanced budgets, we've strengthened our reserves, we've improved our bond ratings, we've gotten upgrades in our bond ratings each year for the last 4 years, and we've made historic progress on pension funding. So that's put us in a good financial position to meet the present challenges. And they're challenges not just for us, but for the city and the state as well. Part of it is the loss of the federal resources, the American Rescue Plan Act resources, as you pointed out earlier. Part of it is rising costs for labor and for our pensions. But it's also court decisions. We've had some adverse court decisions which have impacted the county, potentially impacted the county significantly.
About 30 seconds left. What do you think the plan might be going forward to bridge that gap?
Well, we're always going to look for efficiencies, and we've already instituted a holdback to be sure that we meet our budget projections for 2026, and we'll be looking for efficiencies and to tighten our belts in the fiscal year coming up, 2027. But it's going to be difficult for us, as it was for the state, to balance our budget. We've had a lot of experience with tough challenges, and I know we'll make it through this one.
Okay. Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we're back to wrap things up right after this. for this Monday night. Stay connected with our reporters and what they're working on by following us on Instagram at WTTW Chicago. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Author of the new book, Crime Fictions, joins us to discuss wrongful convictions and Chicago's infamous place in that history. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports educational initiatives in the legal profession.